If you can just clear the air about, whether it's a predisposed condition, not predisposed, curable, not curable, because, these are the common terms people use about treatment and cure.
Kids are denied the right of education. It just ends up that kids have nowhere to go.
All children learn, all children can make progress. And the idea of support is to help all children reach their full potential.
If we want to be Vishwa Guru or Viksit Bharat, at least we need basic things. Like, it should not take years to get a disability certificate.
Doctor who worked with my son, when I asked him, what do I do at home? And she said, just be his mom. You're not his therapist, you're not his doctor. Just be a mom.
My whole life I've felt that I don't belong to this place. I don't belong to this school. I don't belong in this setting. Something is wrong with me.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Big FPJ Dialogue. I am Afrida Rahman Ali. With me is Anushka Jagtiani. We are going to talk about the fact that out of the estimated 70 million neurodivergent individuals in India, only 10 to 15% find themselves in the workforce. We want to address the issue of inclusion. We also want to talk about the caregivers. We often forget them in this conversation about neurodivergent kids. Anushka?
Thanks, Afrida. Absolutely. We often forget about the mental health problems that caregivers go through. And I just want to say, inclusion has become such a fashionable word. We talk about LGBTQ inclusion, gender, religious inclusion, but far fewer people in India talk about inclusivity when it comes to people with disabilities. And we have a panel that goes beyond medical experts and doctors. We have self-advocates and parent advocates because it's so important to include them in any conversation to make it meaningful. I'm going to introduce our panel. I'm going to go that way. Okay. So we have Mughda Kalra, autism activist, parent advocate, writer on diversity and inclusion. We have Tayzeem Rasool, autistic self-advocate and school inclusion champion with Ummeed. We have Dr. Koyeli Sengupta, who is a developmental pediatrician and also has a degree in child psychology. And we have Ami Jagtiani, who is a parent advocate and a lawyer by qualification. First question to the doctor on the panel. Dr. Koyeli, if you can tell us what you mean by neurodivergent, because this is a term not everyone will be familiar with, neurodivergent and neurotypical. If you can just briefly explain.
Sure. So thank you for having us here. I think I just want to clarify that neurodiversity is an idea, right? And it's an idea that everyone, all of us, experience and interact with the world differently. There is no one right way of behaving, learning, thinking, and that differences are just that. They are not deficits or not defects. So the idea of neurodiversity actually did start from the autism space, and autistic self-advocates started that. But now it has broadened much more, and now the idea of neurodivergence has spread across different other neurodevelopmental conditions like ADHD and learning disabilities. And this goes against the idea of thinking of some people as normal, or that a neurodevelopmental condition is something that needs to get fixed, because what we are saying is that so many of us are along different points of a neurodivergent spectrum. So many of those who call themselves very proudly neurodivergent will refer to the rest of us as neurotypical. So that's how we kind of think about neurodivergence and neurotypicality.
Yeah, I want to bring in Mughda in this. I said in my opening, Mughda, that there's recorded data. So obviously, I'm suggesting that there could be unrecorded data. What is your understanding of the quantum that we are looking at here? Because we want to look at representation, we want to talk about inclusion. But before that, let's at least understand, what are the figures like, Mughda?
We do have a data deficit in the country. And it was only after my advocacy started that I started to figure the deficits in our system. If you do not have adequate data about the number of people who are living with the neurodiversity and conditions and disorders, you will not be able to help them completely. The reason why the blind in the country or the hearing impaired in the country have better rights, have better voice, is because their numbers are with the government. We haven't had a census since 2011. And even in 2011, when the census happened, nobody was asked this question: if there is an autistic individual in your house. 2016 was the first time when the disability bill recognized neurodiversity as part of the 21 disabilities that are now part of the bill. So you can imagine that there is a huge data deficit. The government officials I speak to, I work with closely, they say whatever the numbers are coming to you from our departments, just multiply them by 4 or 5, because we ourselves don't know what is the extent. And perhaps as a pressure group, even in India, if we have to ask for policies, if we have to ask for intervention, we need to know the exact number. But if you look at UK, the numbers that are coming from US and UK, the neurodiversity numbers are standing at 1 in 5 and 1 in 7. And autism occurrence is standing at 1 in 30. Now, if you go out, I ask anybody who's watching the show, if you go out and ask somebody in your family, friends, acquaintances, or in the apartment complexes that you're living at, do you know somebody who's different than you or your child? Or do you know somebody young who is not looking neurotypical to you? In their language, they'll say, "Aapko jo normal nahi dikh raha hai." And they will come up with at least 3 or 4 names that they can remember of people in their vicinity. You speak to teachers, you will get to know that 10%, 10 to 15% of kids in the classes today are somewhere on the neurodiversity spectrum. So we are looking at a major data deficit, which is stopping us from getting the support that we need really from the government.
You said data deficit, so the figures are quite conservative. It's probably a lot more. And to have any meaningful sort of inclusion, you need to have the numbers. I want to come to Tayzeem. Tayzeem, your journey will be inspirational to many, right? You are on the spectrum. You have a job. How did you discover you are on the spectrum? What led to your diagnosis?
Yeah, I think even back when I was in school, my parents and my teachers, they, because lack of awareness, they did not know. They just thought he is just a shy kid and will do well if he tries enough. So during my childhood and early years, it got missed. But later on, when I was started working, work like 9 to 5, working in a typical corporate thing became difficult for me. I did not understand why is it difficult for me, what are the challenges, because at that point of time even I was not aware of all these things. And after that I read somewhere about learning disabilities and not neurodiversity. I learned about learning disabilities initially, and that's when I started digging and I started researching. I reached out to professionals, but at that point of time as well, I was working as a freelance professional, and that was working really well for me. And that's when I realized that, okay, I might have been different as a child, but I was not sure about what different exactly. But because I had developed my coping strategies and my coping mechanisms, and I was working well as a freelance professional, I didn't put much effort into going there. But after that, when I met a child who had similar needs, and what really hit me hard was the parents and the teachers of that child were again saying similar things कि वो बच्चा करना नहीं चाहता है, वो ज़्यादा efforts नहीं करता है, वो lazy है, इसलिए नहीं हो पा रहा है. But because I could understand what the child is going through, the child needs support, that's when it hit me कि oh, it's not the child's problem, it's like your problem. You're not providing support, you're not understanding the needs of the child. And because I didn't have that language, I didn't know what to respond to the parents and the teachers, that put me into I was like, okay, I need to understand more, I need to know more.
So that's when beautifully said.
I started volunteering with different organizations who work in this. I started volunteering with a special school because I was in Delhi back then. So I started volunteering there. I started understanding what different conditions are, what neurodiversity is, what autism is, what learning disabilities are. And that's where I could relate to, oh, this is so me when I was a child. And I got to know about how to support the children. and that's where my journey started. And then I did a fellowship in inclusive education with Ummeed, which is a 2-year program. And after completing that, because all the time when I was working in the special school, I always felt that children need to be together. They don't need to be singled out and put in a special school separately. Why am I in a special school? Why am I not in a mainstream school? And that's when the inclusion fellowship, I came to know about the Ummeed's inclusion fellowship program, and I applied for the program. I came to Mumbai for that. I was a part of the fellowship program for 2 years, and now also I'm working in the same space, because I believe that all the schools should be inclusive and all children should be together and learn together. That's what
I have quite a few takeaways, but top of my mind, I mean, what you said so beautifully, Anushka, I think you'll agree that, understanding the needs of a child, failing to do that. And many of us, we fail to understand the needs of a child. And you, like you said, that is when you first realize it's not the child, it's the failure to understand the need of the child. And the second thing that you said, I feel, which is very important, and Ami, I want you to come into this, is the support and the fact that isolation, can be the worst thing, and the support that a child needs. Can I hear out from you the personal experiences that you may have had raising a neurodivergent child?
So I absolutely want to first address what Tayzeem said. It is very important for a child to learn in a classroom setup, and that there is no parallel schooling, because children learn from each other. You build social relationships when you're in a class together, and I also feel that the neurotypical children learn from the neurodivergent children, because they learn empathy, they learn how to tolerate differences. My experience, my journey vis-a-vis schools, more about schools? So my journey vis-a-vis schools has been, I've had the experience of my daughter being both in a mainstream school and in an integrated school. The mainstream school definitely had the intention of inclusion, but for inclusion to really be effective, you need to the school needs to firstly take full responsibility of the child academically and holistically, and they need to carefully understand and set up structures that support the child. They also usually do not have the physical infrastructure for children who have physical limitations. The integrated school that my daughter goes to had some structures in place. For example, the teachers were specially trained to deal with different situations that arise with different neurodivergent children. They also were able to integrate the academic curriculum with therapy and life skills. So it gave a more holistic experience to our daughter. They had the physical infrastructure. They also have enrichment programs, because what is the ultimate goal and concern of most parents? What is your child going to do when they grow up? A purpose, something that can translate into a career or occupation. So they have enrichment programs that enable the child to explore interests and to figure out what their strengths are. So maybe, work on the strengths, focus on strengths rather than weaknesses, to find a purpose which will translate into a career. Also, very important, they give a lot of importance to mental health. So a lot of socio-emotional regulation that is tied in with the academic journey. Yeah. So that is just generally my experience.
But then, from what I make out, you're telling me that you tried a mainstream school and it didn't seem to work out. And that is not, I think, the most desirable way, is it? I mean, you would have liked your child to...
Because as Tayzeem was saying, it's better to have neurotypical and neurodivergent people in the same classroom.
Yes, so I would have liked that. I think, honestly, right now the situation is that there are not many schools that want to be inclusive, and kids are denied the right of education. It just ends up that kids have nowhere to go. Kids with certain conditions have nowhere to go. Schools that want to be inclusive, and the school that my daughter was at, the mainstream school, definitely wanted to be inclusive. It's just that they did not have these structures in place. They've not been doing it for long enough. So there are a lot of teething problems, a lot of things that they may not have thought of when they took on the responsibility. The integrated school that we put her in, though it is an integrated school, there are children with very mild learning disabilities. In fact, there are children who have come from her mainstream school to the school in the higher grades because they could not cope with the curriculum. The great thing about the integrated school is they are offering the mainstream curriculum, which is IGCSE, along with NIOS, and they are also offering an adaptive program for children who cannot cope. So the reality is that inclusion has not been effective, even in the mainstream school that had every intention to implement it.
So the intention is there, but it just doesn't get translated. I want to come to myths and misconceptions. Koyeli, maybe we can start with you. What is the biggest myth about neurodivergency?
I want to just add, Anushka, that if you can just clear the air about, whether it's a predisposed condition, not predisposed, curable, not curable, because, these are the common terms people use about treatment and cure, therapy.
Sure. So, and once again, neurodivergence or neurodiversity is not one condition, but it could be an umbrella term for different kinds of conditions. But most of these are considered as what we call as neurodevelopmental conditions. They have a neurological basis, but they are there from the early stages of a child's development, right? And none of these are diseases, right? So which means that if it's not a disease, we are not looking for a cure. But that doesn't mean that children can't make progress, and all children make progress. And that's what we want to talk to caregivers and care providers about, that all children learn, all children can make progress, and the idea of support is to help all children reach their full potential. So that's what we are talking about. It's not looking for a way to fix children, it's not looking for a way to cure children, right? So that's, and when you talk about is there a predisposition? So yes, when we look at research, we do know that there is a genetic predisposition. But what's also important is to be able to understand, very simply put, that if there is a change in the genes, it doesn't mean that it is inherited. Because sometimes people think that if you're telling me it's genetic, oh, but that doesn't mean that my husband or I had it. Genetic predisposition doesn't always work out that it has to be inherited from your immediate parents. It might be there in the family, or often in many of these conditions, it might be a new genetic change or a new mutation, right? But yes, so it is important to understand that there is a genetic predisposition to it, to answer your question. Now, I'll go on to what you asked, Anushka, right, about, misconceptions. So I'm going to actually latch on to what Ami you said, because I think very rightly so. For the longest of time, of course, in the last few years, we've tried, our emphasis in the physician community has been, let's pick up kids early, right? If we catch them early, we can intervene early, early diagnosis, early intervention, better progress. Absolutely so. But the other part is, most autistic children will lead the maximum of their lives as, or even, all neurodivergent children will lead the most part of their lives as adults. And our intervention has to prepare them for the next phase of their lives. So I want us to think of early intervention in a broader context, right? So to move early intervention or broaden the scope of early intervention from intervening in the early years to intervening early and optimally across the years, right? In leading up to early adulthood. So that's really important, because what we know, the data context is that many neurodivergent folks, in addition to their primary neurodivergent condition, often have co-occurring conditions. So there may be more predisposition to having a coexistent ADHD or a coexistent learning disability, coexistent anxiety, and often these get missed.
Right. Okay, so you have to go beyond early intervention. And before
I'm
we
saying
carry
beyond,
on,
yes.
yeah, before we carry on, I want to just clarify that Ami, your daughter has cerebral palsy, which is also a neurodivergent condition.
Yes.
These are also neurodevelopmental disorder.
Yes.
Is one way of putting it.
Yes.
Myth.
Before coming to the myth, I think my life has been moving between the myths that we have been living in as a country. And I feel now at 46, I don't feel rather benevolent towards them. A lot of anger comes out. But if I were to talk about neurodiversity, you know, one thing that we need to understand is neurodiversity is such a huge spectrum that on the one side, there are people who are celebrating their neurodiversity, right? On the other hand, there are people who are living a diseased life with their neurodiversity because there are so many comorbid conditions. You may have epilepsy, you may have gut issues, you may have insomnia, you may have anxiety disorders. So, you know, for people who are at the suffering end of neurodiversity, the message to the world is don't ask their parents or their families or the neurodiverse individual themselves to start celebrating it. You know, for a parent, it is a lot to handle, right? The other neurodiversity is, so you know, you look at neurodiversity from the spectrum of disease, from the spectrum of difference, difficulty, and then a celebration of my mind works differently, but I'm absolutely functional. Do I like the fact that my child is semi-verbal or non-verbal? Hell not. What do I celebrate then? But yes, I love him because he doesn't know any other way of living, but I have expectations from him. So it is the caregiver's expectation, the family's expectations, the world's expectations that are from their child. But what we need to understand about neurodiversity when it comes to a child is the Marathi word for it, which means swamagna. He is happy in his own world. And you know, so उनको उतना नहीं फर्क पड़ रहा है जितना कि acceptance में एक parent को फर्क पड़ रहा है. You know, so that journey of a caregiver has to be supported.
In fact, that's what we were thinking, you know, when we decided to do this. We decided, and Anushka and me consciously said that, listen, we will have to talk about the caregivers, and I'm glad you brought that up, because often enough in these conversations, we talk about the neurodivergent kids. Yes, we do try to understand it and everything, but we always end it with that and we forget. And you've written a book, Mughda. I see you, I get you. That's what it's called. Please show us.
Yes, it is.
Please show us the book. By all means, you can sort of show our viewers the book, which is
self-care guide for special needs parents. And
what's it about? Tell us about the book.
You know, I think a diagnosis, as I always say, comes for the entire family. And from being called the refrigerator mom in the 1940s to where we are right now. And
Why refrigerator mom?
The refrigerator moms were, you know, so in the past, even now it happens, but in the past there was a term for moms like me who had autistic children because we were cold wombs. And that is what we were so you know, so there is a lot of stigma, there is a lot of trauma attached with it, and this was back in the 1940s that, you know, this is what we were called. Even now, when say a person will come to doctor, you know, one of the things doctor will do for record keeping is ask you, how was your pregnancy? She is not asking you from the point of view to judge you, but the person you have come with could be an extended family, could be your partner, could be people around you. When they listen to that question, when they hear that, automatically the burden of producing a child who is not perfect or normal comes on the mother. And in the Indian context, if you look at it, the intersectionality of caregiving and a woman is a double-edged sword because you give up on your careers. You are your child's primary caregiver. you are perhaps isolating yourself from the rest of the people and your support group, and there are very few people who will understand you. Now, I come from a very, very privileged place. So, you know, I can be only grateful for what life has offered me. But have I faced isolation? Yes. So, I can only imagine what somebody who doesn't have the support goes through. So, what we are also looking at is, as a caregiver with a child with moderate support needs. Again, on the neurodiversity spectrum, you also have somebody who's a self-advocate, who can live his life independently, who can go about, he can earn money for himself. But you know, I'm looking at a child with moderate support needs, and even though he's 15 right now, I want to be hopeful that he will be able to live an independent life. But as a caregiver right now, in my 40s and my husband turning 50, we are looking at earning money for 2 lifetimes, even though I'm hopeful. And the question for me, in Ami's case, her daughter is better off in terms of support needs, lack of support needs. In Ami's case, her question is, what will my child do in future? In my question, in my life, the question is, what after me? Right now, I'm taking care of my child. And the worst thing I have heard from parents who I interact with, mothers who I interact with, is, I want my child to die before me. Who says that? But this is a country where parents are forced to say that because that's how they feel. And so it is a lot of trauma. You know, we have the numbers, we have the awareness, but do we have the acceptance? Perhaps not. And that acceptance can only happen when you are taking care of yourself, because it's no longer a luxury. You have to stay fitter, you have to live longer. It's a necessity because for your child. But that is the bigger problem that we are facing. Now, there's no caregiver inclusive environment, because मेरे साथ में कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है, तो फिर you know मेरा ख्याल रखने के लिए why should anybody be
Dr. Koyeli has got a flower.
Yeah,
I know, I just
but Ami, I wanted to bring Ami into this conversation as a caregiver. It's because your daughter also is not mobile; she cannot walk. Again, you had to give up a lucrative career as a lawyer. So, if you want to weigh in on what Mughda said.
Yes, so I think every parent of a neurodivergent child has some concern or the other. Primary caregiver burnout is a reality. There is seldom very little time for a primary caregiver for self-care and to kind of address their own emotional needs. There is no choice. You have to get up in the morning, you have to get out of bed, and you have to function. Your time is not yours. I think most parents of even neurotypical kids will say that, but for a parent of a neurodivergent child, this is a lifelong commitment. It's not limited to a few years. Along with that come worries like, you know, what is the long-term picture for my child? Like Mughda said, who will look after my child when I'm no longer there? There aren't enough residential setups that we know of, or at least I don't know of, despite the research I've been trying to do to, you know, take care of children who absolutely cannot be functional. So as a primary caregiver, my main goal has always been, how can I, you know, empower Amira with life skills that will make her functionally independent. I have gone from a situation where my child till the age of 9 used to crawl everywhere. I have not met any other person in that situation in India. And from there she went to a situation where she could walk with a walker in even the most limited spaces. 2 years ago, again, it's been a bit downhill, and Amira's been confined to a wheelchair once again. And my constant concern is that besides the long-term picture, also, you know, we'll provide for her financially. We have the luxury to do that. We are privileged that we can do that. But what is going to make her want to get out of bed every day? What is going to be her purpose? What is going to be her passion? how do I help her find that passion? And no, there is no guidance or no counseling that, at this point that I have found even in the integrated school where they are able to guide me, because at this point when she's 14, I cannot see any glaring strengths. Sometimes neurodivergent children have glaring strengths. They'll be very good with cooking, or they'll be very good with art, you know, and then they can consider a career, you know, in hotel management or as a chef, or they could think of being a cartoonist, for example, if they're very good with designing. But when you don't see that, it's a very difficult journey to, you know, keep trying to find the strength in the child.
That is the myth. The myth is that everybody thinks that once your child is diagnosed with neurodiversity of some kind, they will have a superpower. This whole
Do you think the media, the content also, like sometimes that we see, have also glorified that to maybe a little beyond realistic
I think what
terms?
happens, you know, there are two things that happen. One is that parents start to look for the superpower, right? And invariably people will ask you that, अच्छा autistic है तो और क्या करता है, right? And I want to tell them he's just a lazy teenager. At the moment he doesn't want to do anything. The fact that he gets up in the morning, takes a shower, bathes, goes for his classes, that itself is a huge thing for me at 15. But yeah, this whole thing about, you know, that they will have some some superpower, I think that is a big myth. But what I think I'll agree with Ami is that, you know, we want as parents to find out an activity that engages them, right? They need not, you know, 80% of people on the spectrum with moderate to reasonable support needs cannot be hired. But can they work in sheltered workshops? Can they interact with the people of in sheltered spaces? Can they do they enjoy people's companies? Yes, they do. But
so we need those sort of
we need those kind of environments versus perhaps you know, having this pressure of finding our kids superpowers, because at you know, teenage is the worst time to find a superpower.
And also
anyways,
with the right accommodations and a little bit of like support, like a buddy system or something, you can actually integrate them into a mainstream learning and work environment. You know, my daughter has cerebral palsy, and it is famously known as somebody who has a brain injury. One of the myths is that brain injury or neurodivergent kids with brain injury have no intellectual abilities, or they have intellectual disabilities, which is not true, because in her case there is you know, her brain injury has basically damaged her motor function and her movement.
Not her intellectual capacities.
No, cognitively she's all there. She may have co-occurring conditions, so I don't know at this point if she has a learning disability. I have been advised not to get her diagnosed or her IQ testing done and things like that, because she's getting enough rehabilitation, and you know, at some point you have to kind of make life not about therapy and rehabilitation, and she's doing well, and she could technically cope with a mainstream curriculum as well. It's just a choice as parents that we've taken, that we do not want to stress her out. She's anyways got a very difficult journey. She's had you know, multiple surgeries in the last 5 years, as many as 8 if I can be precise, and we don't want to tax her further, but at the same time we just want to empower her to, you know, kind of later on in life, if she wants to do something, study something, have a degree.
Do you agree with Mughda? Because she said that what is required are these sort of enabling environment where you have maybe a place where people, even neurodivergent kids with common interests, are like co-inhabiting, you know, and doing similar things. Do you think that is the need of the hour?
I think what is required is to understand the strengths of the child or the person who, even if we are looking for education or even for the job. So when we look at the strengths, what the person can do and focus on those areas, I think that's the best place to support, because then we know which areas the person is has their interest also and is their strength as well, and that's how the person, it depends on their need. If a person is not comfortable working in a group setting, is comfortable working in a one single place setting, why can't they work from home or have a setup at their home where they work independently and do their work and complete it and earn from that? They don't have to be in a 9 to 5 job. Like, even if a high functioning person has anxiety around people and functions best if they are in their studio or in their home working in their place, whatever their deliverables are, they are doing that from their function. Why is there a requirement for them to be in an office, right? If they can function from anywhere, they whatever works for them is their interest, should be given to any person, I believe. I think that's, and the other thing what Mughda talked about, the spectrum of neurodiversity, and one end being celebrating it and one end kind of mourning it. I think why that happens is from the celebrating end, is people who celebrate neurodiversity is mostly who are late diagnosed or self-diagnosed, mostly because when they are late diagnosed, they have spent most of their life questioning themselves and the feeling of being an alien. Like, for my whole life, I've felt that I don't belong to this place, I don't belong to this school, I don't belong in this setting, something is wrong with me. But then the moment I realized about my diagnosis, I felt like, oh, I belong here. This is, it answers all my questions. I had a million questions throughout my childhood, my whole life. But the moment I came to know about neurodiversity, I could relate to it. I celebrated it because I was like, oh, my whole life I've been lost. Right. But now I feel I found my tribe, I found my place, I belong here. And on the other hand, when parents get to know about the diagnosis of a child, oh, your child is autistic, or your child has ADHD, or your child is neurodiverse, they immediately think of it as the end of the world. Yeah. This means now my child will need lifelong support and won't be able to do anything, and it shatters my dreams as a caregiver, and they start mourning that. And that reflects on the child, on how you interact with the child, how the child grows, and what the child sees in their environment. I think that's the two ends of the spectrum, and I know that child, there will be spectrum of needs. Some child will need more support, some child will need less support. No matter what support they need, at the end of the day, they are still a child, is still a person, is still a human, and they have the right to be and live their life and have the support that they need.
I think it's that's what I say. Madhav doesn't realize that he's different. He's absolutely fine with his differences. It's also because he is at a certain place on the spectrum. But the kids who go to school and get bullied, the kids who go to school and do not get they're not understood, or the ones that have comorbid conditions where they are grappling with anxiety disorders or early onset of childhood, it's not Alzheimer's, it's schizo. You know, yeah. You know, when those comorbid conditions come in, you know, it's a lot of fear that they are living with. It's a lot of, so, you know, mental health becomes a very important piece then. There is a lot of resentment that comes in parents. And I'm being very blunt about it because I don't want to romanticize this whole notion of I'm going to accept my child the way he is, because now we have children who are going through multiple surgeries in a year. So when you are looking at it from a disease point of view where, you know, why does my child need medication otherwise? He is suffering, right? He had to go through an MRI at 10, right? He had a seizure, you know, so then you feel कि physically कुछ ना हो ना बच्चे को, mentally चाहे बच्चा कहीं भी हो, you know, whether he is low IQ, high functioning, low functioning. But when it starts to affect the child physically, I mean, you know, a neurotypical parent, बुखार होता है तो, you know, जान निकल जाती है. And here you're looking at so many conditions.
So I think so one is that about the conditions, but also a big thing about why parents feel so overwhelmed is a systemic issue.
Absolutely.
Right? It's a systemic issue, and I think it's such a big thing, and that's why when we are talking about how do we shape our children's futures, it's at an ecosystem level, and that's why the question cannot stay limited at what is the diagnosis, what does therapy look like, but to be able to think about interventions to beyond just therapy. She's talking about so many things. You know, Tayzeem is talking about so many things. Tayzeem at the heart of it is talking about the child's, or not just the child, the young adults, the adults' right to live their lives as they want to. Respect for them, for their differences, their preferences, their autonomy, right? And that they have agency, the right to choose. And what's really important is something that we are hearing from Ami, from Mughda, is that everybody has the right to participate, the right to participation. Right? And that takes us to so many things, that participation in events, participation in playing with other kids and malls, right? So how do we shift the conversation from placing the burden of neurodivergence and helping children progress not just on the shoulders of the child and the family, and saying that we are all in this together.
Yeah, we are all in this together, and that brings me to another big issue, because mindset has to change. Okay, awareness, we spoke about that people have to be aware about what this is, and that's partly why we're having this discussion. Mindset, but also things like just your physical infrastructure and accessibility. I mean, look, Mumbai is a metropolitan city, but how many places you go to have no ramps?
Yeah.
You know,
Especially
for someone
in South Bombay.
I mean, that's just,
Even in schools,
Yeah.
even in residential buildings.
yes.
And the assumption is, sorry I'm interrupting, and the assumption is somebody who is wheelchair bound does not need to go out of the house, and that becomes a reality because it is so inconvenient to go out of the house that you lose that interest. You want to just be in a safe space. You don't want to be seen carried when you're a teenager. You don't want everybody to know you're going to the restroom, you know, because there is no accessible toilet and you're, you know, it's awkward and you have to make inquiries. I find in the suburbs, I mean, I recently went to 2 malls in the suburbs because it was like a school visit, and I went to our city mall in Ghatkopar, and I went to another mall in Goregaon East. I was very pleasantly surprised. From the time my daughter got off the car onto her wheelchair, she has an electric wheelchair now, she was independent for the full evening, for 3 or 4 hours. It was like such an amazing feeling for her, and she said, I want to go shopping again next time. From a situation where she would be like, I don't want to get out of the house, I'll just watch TV.
So that really helps if you have
it
the
does.
infrastructure in place, and therefore the society at large. I mean, the onus is on a lot on the society, isn't
No,
it?
actually, Doc said the right thing. You know, the system doesn't allow you to function well, and the burden of handling a diagnosis or the stress of caregiving is only on the family. So the system is broken. We talk about school. Which school? I do not believe in inclusive education for a child with moderate support needs. I do not. It's in the name of inclusion, it's integration. साथ में खेलने दो, लेकिन आप उनको help कर रहे हो. If you are in a position to help them, you are charging me. The right to education says you cannot charge me for a shadow teacher, but every school asks for a shadow teacher. So you pay 25,000 as your school fee, and you spend 15 to 18,000 from your pocket for the shadow teacher who will come and sit with your child in the class because the teacher there cannot handle him. So where do people like me, you know, we still can afford, but you know, what about people who are in a place where they cannot afford a shadow teacher, where they cannot even afford to send their children to a school where the teachers understand that there is neurodiversity.
Yeah, so that, you know, we call ourselves, if we want to be Vishwa Guru or Viksit Bharat, I mean, at least we need basic things, like it should not take years to get a disability certificate. And we shouldn't have to say, oh, this mall has a ramp. Every mall, every building should have a ramp and accessibility. Which brings me to the legislation, the RPWD Act, the Persons with Disability Act. I mean, we have our laws in place.
You know, in fact, the laws, Ami will tell you, the laws are excellent. The laws, if you look at the latest RTE, Right to Education, the laws are excellent. Compliance is shit.
Yeah, there's no implementation, right? There's no
implementation.
compliance. So that's the thing. What's the point of having the laws if there's no compliance? Because according to the laws, 4% of government jobs are also supposed to be reserved for people with disabilities. There is specific guidelines that offices are supposed to follow, but it doesn't happen. And I just want to read out some statistics that, a study was conducted about, a survey conducted in 2017 by the Center for Talent Innovation found that in India, amongst all the employees with disabilities, 56% receive insults. I mean, then this law is supposed to prevent discrimination. 57% feel that other employees are uncomfortable around them, and 74% feel that despite their performance and qualifications, they will never attain positions of power in their respective organizations.
And now they're pulled back DEI.
Maybe
So,
Tayzeem should
there we
come
are.
in. And maybe Tayzeem should come in. And how do we ensure better inclusion, better understanding in the workplace?
Yeah, I think even in the workplace, it should not end at ki you hire somebody with a disability and that's it. Now that we have hired you, we've done something for you. Now it's your responsibility to take care of job, and we expect you to function similar to your colleagues. At the same time, we provide you zero support. We don't understand what your needs are, and we expect you to work because we have hired you. We've done something enough for you. We've hired somebody with a disability. I think that should not be the case. It should not end at hiring, but the support system should be there throughout when they are working with any organization, be it government, be it private as well. Not only in government, even in private, a lot of places friends of mine have worked. They said ki under DI we got hired, but after that there was no support. Nobody understands ki what neurodiversity is in their team. So nobody even understands ki how to even have a conversation with them, how to include them in their team things, and that then adds on to the mental health of that individual, which leads to them being ki why am I here? What am I doing here?
Tayzeem, tell us, what is the nature of the work that you do? You are working with Ummeed, and you are a champion of neurodivergent kids being included in schools. School inclusion is one of your, mainstay of what you do. But tell us, what is the nature of the work, your day-to-day work?
Yeah, so I specifically work with the school services team at Ummeed Child Development Center, and our team works with schools. So we work with Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is one of the government's projects. We do some trainings with them, and most of our trainings are with different schools that we work with, even in the fellowship program or other programs, or trainings for teachers to understand what neurodiversity is and how they can support children in their classrooms, so that they don't need what mostly happens in schools is if there is a child with any disability, what they feel is ki this child is not my responsibility. If there are 40 children in a classroom and there is one child who is neurodiverse or has any disability, they feel this child is responsibility of either the school counselor or the special educator. I don't have to teach that child. So that special educator and the counselor will take care of that child. I have to take care of or a shadow teacher. Yeah, or a shadow teacher. I have to take care of the 39 children. So what our role is, what we do trainings for is ki all the 40 children are your responsibility, and how the teachers can design their lessons in a way which cater to the needs of all the children. Even if there is a child with learning disability in a classroom, if you do something, if you use maybe a visual, say for example using visuals is one of the strategies we say, it does not help only that one child with a learning disability. It helps all the children in the classroom. A child who maybe learn differently, who maybe is a visual learner. These visuals or using these strategies will not help only that one child, but all the children in the classroom. We do something called as universal design for learning. So using those tools in the classrooms, it does not only help the children with disability or children who have any specific needs, but it helps all the children. So that's
So I want to add to this, you know, my experiences with schools is exactly what Tayzeem is saying. Firstly, when you're taking the child, and he said and I said that you should take full responsibility. What does that mean? You're taking in the child, but you have you've not got the structures. There are many dimensions to this. Firstly is the awareness, understanding, sensitivity of what is neurodivergence. Most mainstream schools, you will find that teachers and the teachers don't understand what that means. They don't know how to differentiate. Then we talk about the training of these children, the teachers, the professional development, the physical infrastructure, like, you know, the seating is important. How can the children listen and speak better? You know, ramps, lifts, accessible bathrooms. What about the instructional infrastructure? So, you know, differentiating the curriculum, you know, and then the engagement, enabling the student to participate in the classroom setup, as Tayzeem said, you know, because they learn better in the class. Other children will benefit from the, you know, alternative aids of learning that the teacher may be using. And very importantly, collaboration. There is a village that you need a village to look after any child. So with a neurodivergent child, you have many professionals who are working with the child. But if they don't integrate the goals and work together, it's not going to benefit the child.
You were
it
also
causes
saying,
more
Ami, that you are a
confusion.
big believer of how therapy can and must be resorted to, and no
Absolutely.
parent should give up or think that कोई फायदा नहीं है or something. Can you share that experience
Yes,
as well?
so my experience has been that, you know, therapy has gone, in my case personally, my daughter has benefited a lot from therapy, as you know, Dr. Koyeli has said, not only early on in life, but, you know, persistent intervention. You need to, what I have learnt is, you cannot give up. You have to keep trying. If you are seeing a little bit of progress, there are situations where you may not see progress, but in certain situations, especially cognitively, when there is some cognitive ability, if they don't get it now, it doesn't mean that they won't get it later. I was told that my daughter will never read. My daughter, after I followed a certain program with her, after a lot of research, I'm not trained, I'm not a professional, there was nobody to guide me at that point. I went abroad, I got a little bit of guidance, few ideas, did this program at home with her. She is reading above grade level. You know, so intervention goes a long way. For her, mobility wise, it may not have worked as much because, you know, her body does not cooperate with her, you know, mind, and she's got muscular issues. So you don't give up till you've tried it. My issue is that people say a person who's neurodivergent cannot do it. Don't say they cannot do it till you've given them every opportunity to learn. You've used different learning aids, and you've repeated, and you've given them an opportunity to revise and repetition.
Intervention helps, Mughda?
Oh,
Your experience?
absolutely. Oh my God, I can't even begin. And like Doc said, you know, you will need that kind of intervention at every stage because the needs are different. What looks like occupational therapy at a young age looks like sports when they grow up. What looks like, you know, engaging with sound at a young age looks like music therapy, enjoying music at an older age. But intervention is essential primarily also to find out what therapy will work for your child. So for instance, there is a lot of, there's a big movement against applied behavioral analysis, ABA, you know, so it's not one size fits all. So for example, but we tried ABA with my son, we got speech. He started to mand, so he's semi-verbal. Whatever little he speaks now worked with that. I think what both Ami and I will agree to is that, you know, when you are getting into an intervention, go in with entire faith, but have an exit plan ready. Keep experimenting if you can with newer programs, but you know, a lot of times parents also get very overwhelmed. Acha, usne ye kar liya hai, usko isse fayda hua hai, meko bhi wo karna chahiye. And then our children's life also become about therapy. And one of the things that an early doctor who worked with my son, when I asked him, what do I do at home? You know, and she said, just be his mom. You're not his therapist, you're not his doctor. Just be a mom. So, you know, you want to be angry with him, you want to be loving him, you can do anything with him, but just don't give him therapy at home, because there are professionals to do that. Yeah. And I think what happens is that, you know, when we look at therapy, right, to somebody, it looks like, what is the big deal about tabletop and showing them something? But there's a science to it. There is a science behind everything that comes with play therapy or occupational therapy or speech therapy, or you know, even to know that perhaps the child may not need speech as an oromotor speech, but like language and pragmatic language therapy. So, you know, you have to go through all the early interventions to find that thing that fits. And there are people, professionals are putting in years and years of research and study into you know, the interventions. So there is a lot. Holistic intervention is what is very important, be it a combination of the therapies of Ayurveda or homeopathy, you know, what have you in this country. But I think the bottom line is to believe that your child should deserve everything that makes them the best version of themselves.
Is there a word of caution, like, you know, don't fall for the quacks, or, you know,
Yes,
don't
yes,
go to the
absolutely,
Stem cell therapy being
I know,
one of the
I
things
know,
that's being
yeah,
different types of healers.
Yeah, I think yes, intervention is scientific, and there is body of research, and so I think a big part of, you know, the onus falls on us, the physicians, to help caregivers recognize what is evidence-based and what is not, right? Because when parents are there trying to get the best for the child, there will be many people who will suggest many things. Right? And of course, if I'm a parent, I want to do the best for my child. I want to try every single thing. And that's where it's important for us as care providers, as physicians, to not don this holier than thou, very expert approach, but to have these conversations and dialogues with families, right? What's important to you? What's important to the young person? Sometimes, you know, like, you know, Tayzeem is an adult, he's speaking for himself, but sometimes we totally ignore the young person in the room. Right? So what's important to them? So to make sure that in a quest for doing our best, we also ensure that what we are doing is based by evidence, right? The other thing which is very, very important is, there might be 10 things that Mughda has done and 18 that Ami has done, but that's because it has worked best for her child. And that's not going to work for some other child or for some other parent who might be seeing this today. Right? And that's what good intervention is. It has to have certain components. First and foremost, it should be individualized to the child and the family. The same thing may not work for another child who's just like Ami's, because the family setup is different. Right? So that's important. The second thing is that children grow, their needs evolve. So sometimes intervention seems stuck in time. The same thing seems to be happening over the years and years, and it ignores that our children are growing up, their needs change, their bodies change, their thinkings change, right? The third bit is that she said something so beautiful and so important, is the role of the caregiver, right? There's a very fine line between including what's important and creating opportunities for therapeutic principles in everyday life versus becoming the child's therapist, which is not what we want caregivers to become. It places too much of a burden on them. At the same time, we want them involved. We want them to create opportunities for the child to learn new things. And so that's how it's not just the physician, the caregiver, but also the role of caregiver support groups, those who have had this journey before them, to come together and say, hey, done that, been there, done that, can we share from what we've learned?
Dr. Koyeli Sengupta, I want to ask you this question because I see a lot going around about the obsession with screens that adolescent kids have in general, and whether that itself sometimes can lead to certain disorders, discrepancies in the child. Have you faced those sort of questions, and how have you addressed them?
Doc, and if I may add, adults as well.
Adults as well.
Well, I won't comment on adults, that's beyond my zone of expertise. But first, I think, yes, there is just so much, parent concern about my child, my adolescent is on the screen all the time, and there's so much going on about this TV series called Adolescence right now. So yes, there is data to show that there is an impact, a negative impact on child mental health, on anxiety, on how children perceive themselves, on their self-esteem, for sure. So that is definitely there. And also I think but there are some other misconceptions too, because I see a lot of parents, especially mothers, who come to me and who've been told that because you allow the young child to see screen, that is why he or she is autistic. That extension of blaming the mother for a defect in the child, so to say. So there are some things where we have data. For instance, like I said, the correlation between anxiety and self-esteem and mental well-being in adolescents, but we don't have data to support that autism is caused by exposure to screens.
Tayzeem, concluding question for you, actually a remark and a question. A lot of big names and celebrities have come out and spoken about the fact that they are neurodiverse themselves. We have Greta Thunberg, Bill Gates has said it, Emma Watson, Steve Jobs had, Elon Musk, of course, I don't know if that's the right example, but anyway, so they've spoken about being neurodiverse, and these are global change makers, right? They have spoken about being on the spectrum. I read an interesting study from JP Morgan Chase, which found that their autistic employees were 90 to 140% more productive, okay, and made fewer errors as compared to their counterparts. Any comment on this? What are I know we spoke about not believing in the superpowers and not looking for a superpower, but clearly there are some advantages that an autistic person on the spectrum has, like, maybe non-linear thinking. Want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think if we look at the strengths, if we like, even in India, there are a lot of celebrities who have recently come up and talked about their being neurodivergent, like celebrities like Fahad Fasil or Alia Bhatt recently talked about them being neurodivergent. I believe how it builds onto the awareness of how that looks like in our societies, because a lot of times celebrities are looked up to by people, and if they come ahead and talk about their challenges, it gives a hope to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think we should get the two mothers to give us the concluding thought. Mughda, I've known you many years. I've known you over 2 decades. I've seen you, as a young journalist and then becoming a mother and now raising Madhav. What stage of the journey are you in now? How do you feel now? And, what are the best parts? What is your best hope?
When I see the crisis that the neurotypical when I see the crisis that the neurotypical parents are facing today, I feel very blessed to have a neurodiverse child. At 15, I get hugs on demand. I have a very sweet child who is very loving, is very innocent. So sometimes, I feel it's the hugest blessing in disguise. I am a privileged parent, I'm an educated parent, and perhaps my journey as a journalist gave me my purpose and vocation. So, I found answers for myself, and now the joy is in finding answers for others. So I would say my child gave me my purpose, and I think to know your purpose in life is so important as a human being. So that ticks a big box for me, that I am now in a place where I know what I want to do with my life, and which is so important. The second is that I have changed as a human being. My empathy levels to understand somebody else, to not judge, to embrace the very small things in life. I'm sitting here enjoying this breeze and looking at the Bombay skyline and the sea. It's giving me so much joy. I've started to pause to look at the smallest of things that bring me joy, because that's what my gratitude journey teaches me. I write a single gratitude line every single day. I think bringing up a child who is different changes you in ways that you will never realize. Yes, we have our struggles, and the struggles are a lot, and perhaps that's what makes me a little more, if I'm angry, it makes me a little, it only makes me angry because I see others struggle around me for whom it's not a joy as much as it is for me. So I hope to have a world where I don't have to explain to people that my child is different. I hope to have a world where he goes to a school, where he is in birthday parties, where he is with families, where he is at places where he is welcomed with all his quirks. I shouldn't have to worry about giving people explanation. He is autistic, that is why he is doing it. You should be able to figure out he's a different person, and you should be aware enough. So those are the things that I want, and there is a lot that is happening in the world. But I think in our world, say in India, but at the same time, we do have to realize that we are the top 1 percentile of the country. We live in very big cities where all of these interventions, where we need hundreds and thousands of docs. We need hundreds and thousands of Koyeli Senguptas in the country, but do we have them? We don't. So those are the things that we are really wanting to change, because that's the only time when we will be able to say that, what after me will not be a question. My child will thrive. But I'm lucky, but I don't know how many parents are lucky enough to say that, they are okay to leave their child in the world that we live in.
I want to add to what Mughda said. I would really like a resource pool or a platform where caregivers got information and guidance from people who've been through that journey. And no journey is the same, but it can be similar, where you can learn from other parents and neurodivergent children, where you can get ideas, and also I would like this journey not to be an individual journey for both the parents and the neurodivergent children. I would like it to be a really collective journey where we can all work together. There are many parents or institutions that are trying to take initiatives to change things. Like there are parents who are trying to build social platforms for, creating friendships for our children. It's very difficult. There is a lot of empathy and kindness, but it may not be a meaningful friendship. And some children understand that. There are parents who are trying to make sure that the children, get skills and work on their skills where they can be effectively integrated into a mainstream workforce. But I feel like there's still a lot of work to be done, and I still feel that it's an individual journey, because you do not have, you have, for example, a developmental pediatrician who will tie up all these bits for you, the academic part, the life skills, but there are very few that are effective. I also feel for primary caregivers and for neurodivergent children, it is very hard to find professionals who can really understand the struggles and the challenges and help you overcome them. So yeah, I think
that's something both
very
Mughda and
helpful.
Ami has said about how we need more professionals and people who can come together. The community support bit.
Yes, community support, change in mindset, of course, better facilities. Thank you. It's been a very meaningful discussion. Definitely a lot of important points have been brought up. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.